his problem. So, good morning. My name is Eike Stepper. I'm a long-term project lead at Eclipse. My two projects are Oomph, which is the newer one, and the CDO model repository for almost 15 years now. And I've developed Oomph originally to help my CDO committers to set up a CDO workspace quickly. Then I showed it to my friend Ed Merckx, and he said, oh, I want that for EMF. So we made it more flexible. And then we realized we can use it for almost any project to provision workspaces. And then we kept on working on it. And I'll show you what resulted from that today. So imagine there's a company with an existing software project, and the source code lives in a central Git repository. Bonjour. And a new developer comes into this project and wants to work on the source code. So what does he do? First, he installs an Eclipse on his laptop, starts Eclipse, and when it's running, the workspace is empty, of course. So then his project manager told him, here in our intranet, there's the documentation how to set up your Eclipse instance. And he reads a long document with all the installation steps, and we'll quickly run through them so that you see the problem. So first, to get the source code out of the repository, he needs to install the eGit plugins, the eGit client. After he has installed it, good morning. It's the first slide. Okay. So after he installed the eGit client, he needs to configure it in the workspace. And in Eclipse, these preferences are bound to the workspace. That is why I have it on the right side there. Then he can check out the source code from the repository, but he cannot start developing yet because he reads in the setup instructions, bonjour, that the files that he checked out, they contain diagrams, and he needs to install a diagram editor to open these files. So he installs a new set of plugins, let's say eCore tools or Papyrus, and configures them in the workspace. Then he reads that he needs to install a source code generator. Of course, he installs the needed plugins, configures them in the workspace, and finally they measure code metrics, so he needs to install that tool too and configure it. And finally, all his personal tools, like his favorite XML editor, all stuff like that, a whole bunch of plugins that need to be configured and so on. And he thinks, my goodness, the morning is over, when can I start to develop? And it gets worse. When his project manager decides that he has to go to the next project, then the whole thing starts again. And in the third project, of course, again. So it's a lot of time that you lose installing things, configuring things, and everybody on the project does it again and again. So we thought, what can we do against that? And we abstracted the relevant parts or places on your laptop where things need to be installed and configured. And there are basically just three. It's the installation itself, it is the workspace, and something that Eclipse doesn't really know itself, but it is your personal things, independent of a concrete installation or a concrete workspace. These three places are very important for Oomph. And we have made them explicit in Oomph. And these places are really files on your disk. You will find them after you installed with Oomph. This here inside the installation, this file inside the workspace, and this inside your user home folder. And these files contain setup tasks. They are basically EMF model files. And the only thing they contain are setup tasks. And we have a number of these setup tasks. You can also write your own ones. So imagine in this file you could place a P2 director task to install plugins. Because that is not so easy for a beginner, it is possible that you point to existing collections of tasks in catalogs that we provide. For example, you can point from the installation setup to a ready defined product. And this product also contains setup tasks, a number of them. You just point to this catalog. Again, we maintain that at Eclipse, but you can also write your own catalogs. From the workspace, you point to projects in a project catalog that we maintain at Eclipse. And with that, you can already start. Of course, you can still add your own tasks in these three places. We will see that later. For example, over time, you will, I mentioned that these setup tasks here, they are defined in this catalog. So you don't need to copy them, you just point to them. If the catalog changes here, your IDE will automatically pull that in and will be updated accordingly. Same, of course, for the projects. And in your user setup, you typically write tasks like define your own key bindings, install your favorite XML editor, or define associations between file endings and editors, all stuff like that. So once these choices are made in the installer, we will see that in the demo later, of course, the Oomph setup engine, the Eclipse installer, can collect all the tasks that are available now. These tasks are collected, they are sorted according to priorities or dependencies that you can define or the model authors can define. Then the engine identifies missing values in these tasks. An example, these here are P2 director tasks that install plugins. Of course, it must know where on your disk it must be installed. And that can't be written in the models. You must decide that, right? So that are just missing values in these tasks. The engine identifies these missing values and creates variable tasks. And that leads to in the installer, to a prompt page. And then you are prompted, where do you want to install? As an example. You enter these values and the resulting variable assignments are stored in these local files so that when you install again, you are not asked again. When that is done, you can say finish the installation, the installer will run, and you will, after a minute or so, end up with a completely configured Eclipse installation and can start to program. And that is what I want to demo now. So I start the Eclipse installer. You can download it, for example, from the main download site. I guess you have seen it already. It's there for a year or so already. So at the beginning, and in this case on Windows, the installer is a self-extracting native executable, not on the other platforms, Linux and Mac OS X. There you have to unzip it and launch it normally. So you see the first 2 pages of the installer relate directly to these files that I showed, the installation setup. Here you select a product from our product catalog. We have different product catalogs. You can add your own ones too here. In this case, I'll install an IDE for Java developers. Here I can select the product version. In this case, I'll install the latest release, which is currently Mars. Next week it will be, no, sorry, by the end of the month it will be Neon, of course. You can select a Java virtual machine, and I think we do a pretty good job finding all the JREs on your system, so you can manage that here, download new ones, browse for ones that are not automatically found, and so on. By default, we create an installation that is connected to a so-called bundle pool. I'm not sure if you work with many Eclipse installations, we will not install the plugins again and again. They will be kept in a single place, and that is way faster to install and consumes less disk space, of course. If you don't want that, just remove this checkbox here and you get a traditional installation with the plugins in the installation folder. These pools are very cool, I must say. They become a problem when they get corrupt, of course, because then all your Eclipse installations stop to run. And for that, to fix that, we have created some tooling to manage your bundle pools. You can analyze them, for example. So you see I have quite a few installations here already. It lists all the plugins. You see it asynchronously does a damage analysis and can automatically repair damage. So don't be afraid with bundle pools. I use them for years now and it's a cool thing. Okay, so on the next page we pick projects from the project catalogs. And in our case, you see many of the existing Eclipse projects have provided their setup files here. We just link to them, they manage them themselves. So if there's a bug in these setup files, typically the bug reports end in our inbox, but we will forward them to the projects for you. So for the demo, I will install an Oomph workspace, so with the sources of the installer itself. Here you can often pick what version of the product, we call it a stream, it's basically a Git branch you want. And in the Oomph case, we just have a master branch. We don't do maintenance. Maintenance is boring. So this is the page where we have identified the missing values. Most important, the install location, but some others. I have done it so many times that you see I have already entered quite some values before, but they were remembered, so this is all I'm asked now. This is a confirmation page. It lists the tasks that will be executed now. They are collected from all these models that I've selected now. And you see these are the bootstrap tasks. It's a comparingly small list which is needed to bootstrap the installation. After that, the installer will launch the installation and execute the remaining tasks that must run in the IDE. Okay. So this is the last page. It shows the progress of the installation, task by task. Here we have a log. If you select tasks here, it will select the region in the log file, so you have a good overview of what's currently going on. And you see it's mostly this P2 director task that is executed. And you see it installs the product that I've selected, the project, or let me say the plugins that are needed for the projects that I've selected. And you see there are some more. And these are my personal tools from my user setup file. So every IDE that I install, I will have my tools automatically installed. These are quite interesting. They modify the Eclipse INI file. To give you an example what you can do with that, please go away. I often remote debug my Eclipse instances, and I can never remember these two options here that I have to add. Not sure if you have seen that before. So what I do is I add them and I comment them out. So they are already in my INI, and I can just remove this DDD, and then I can remote debug it easily. Of course, I set the heap space to more than the default because I have a lot of memory here. Yeah, you see some other example of tasks. You can create files in your file system. You can modify files. For example, here I set already the location of the default workspace so that this initial dialog doesn't pop up that asks me. And on disk, it typically looks like this. I think I can remove this one. So this is the folder that I picked during the installation in the installer. This is, we call that the installation folder. It contains the Eclipse installation itself, a folder for all the Git repositories. In this case, and here I cheated a little bit because I have just 30 minutes. The longest task is typically cloning the Git repository, so I placed it here already. the installer sees that and says, okay, I don't do it again. The workspace is created. And this disk layout here, we can define rules for the disk layouts. So you don't have to enter all these folder locations for each installation. Yeah, I can't switch back now in the installer. But so I picked this rule once at the very beginning, and then all my installations have this exact layout. So unfortunately, there seems to be new stuff in the eGit repository because we have currently RC4 day at Eclipse. I ran it this morning so that my bundle pool is full. Normally all this stuff would be my bundle pool, but they did a build after that. So what should I tell you? Maybe questions so far? Please.
At the beginning, you select Eclipse IDE for Java development, and that is from basically you selected something from a catalog of possible IDEs.
Yes.
And then you selected
The projects.
A project from a catalog of projects. For example, you installed the Oomph, I think.
Yeah, I selected the Oomph project to be in the workspace.
That means basically you are installing the development tools for Oomph on top of an IDE for Java development.
Yes.
Okay. How can I specify a prerequisite? Let's say
Sorry, what?
prerequisites like if Oomph need I don't know, Eclipse for DSL or modeling tools, can I limit then the initial ID? Say it another way. If I start with an Eclipse for Java development, can I install any of the projects available on the next step?
Yes. So the question is interesting because you remember we had these two, we call them scopes, the installation scope, the workspace scope, and the user scope. What tasks can be in these scopes is not limited. So you can have P2 director tasks of course, in the product scope, in the installation scope. But if your project requires specific tools on top of the product, you can add additional P2 director tasks in the project setups, for example. Was that the question?
Not exactly. So I make you a different example. This morning I tried to install a tool called parseling, a project called parseling.
I know it, yeah.
And I think I had some problem in installing it because I should have not started on a plain Eclipse for Java development.
Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted. I think this takes too long. I'll replace my installation from this morning, then we can go on. So the installer would have created this Eclipse folder. I just took it out of my recycle bin. Sorry, go on, please.
Okay, so basically the question is, my question was, if I start with Eclipse, with any Eclipse, I can install any project from the catalog.
Yes. So I didn't mention you don't necessarily need to use the Eclipse installer to create your installation. Oomph is in all Eclipse downloads from Eclipse. So when you download a zipped package and unzip it, Oomph will already be in it, and you can also immediately import Oomph projects into the workspace, and so it will be connected to the Oomph engine and it will manage the projects. Okay, let me quickly go on. I lost a little bit of a lot of time, I see. So you see here after the startup of the IDE that Oomph is already running. It runs at each startup. You can disable that, but that's the default. So it reconciles your current installation with all the models that are connected each time you start up. And this is probably a bad idea. It will now try to install the new eGit version again. So I just cancel it here. And at any time, you can perform the needed setup tasks here from the help menu, perform setup tasks. It will also start the installer interface again, load the models, see what is needed, and so on. Okay, I'll cancel that here. I would like to show you the user setup file. In the navigate menu, you have with Oomph an entry called open setup. And from here you can open all these models that we were talking about. For example, the user setup. And you see mine is comparingly big because I use Oomph for 2 years now and added a lot of tasks here. For example, I added all these personal tools that I want to have everywhere. A P2 director task per tool. Oomph merges them together and executes them in each IDE. I have a lot of preference tasks, of course, to set the colors and everything like I want it. Of course, I didn't author these tasks all manually. I could have done that, of course. Just say new preference here, and then you can create a preference task. But we have a very cool thing called a preference recorder. So if you go to the normal preferences dialog, you can enable the preference recorder here with this button. So, and when I now change a preference like this one and say OK, Oomph has recorded that as a task into this file, and from this time on, this preference will be set in all your workspaces. Let me quickly change it back. The Neon version of Oomph has an optional additional functionality. You can synchronize this file, especially the preference tasks in it, with your user account at Eclipse.org. So if you're working on multiple machines, you can even transfer all these settings automatically to your other machines. Very interesting if you work with virtual boxes for testing or so. Typically you create a new virtual box and then all your settings that you don't even know how to set them anymore. I've done this 2 years ago and Oomph applies them everywhere, but not on other machines. That's also possible now. Yeah, there's definitely a lot more to say, but time is running. And
Sorry, can I steer?
Yes, please.
This user setup file, I'm not sure I understood properly. Is it shared through all the Eclipse versions you have on your
Not by, yes, this is shared. This user setup is shared across all your workspaces on your machine, but not across all your machines. That is possible, but you will be asked, when you switch on the recorder the first time, you will be asked, do you also want to synchronize it with Eclipse.org? Then you can say yes or no.
Okay, that I understood, but this sharing is done automatically? Do we have to do something?
No, that happens automatically. You can disable it, but it's on by default. Yeah.
We have several users that set up files on the same machine. For example, in some cases I want to completely configure my environment when I start a new workspace. And other times I want just to test a specific version of Eclipse and I don't want the setup task to run. Is it possible to do that?
So I'll repeat the question. Is it possible to have multiple such files for different scenarios? That is not possible, but you can fine-tune this file to recognize these scenarios. So each task, let me pick a preference task here, has the properties of this task, and they all share a common set of infrastructure properties. And here you can define restrictions. You can say only if I work on this project or something like that. Now, it's quite flexible. There's not too much documentation available yet, but we have something on the wiki. especially a small guide for task authors, if you want to author the tasks in your user setup, for example. You probably will want to define your own project setups and register them in a company catalog or something like that. That is all possible, and companies use that already. Can boost your productivity because you don't have to spend a day or two to install complex workspaces, so on. Very interesting topic is also, and that is the last one I tell you about today. You can import additional projects at any point in time. So if you go here, there's an import wizard. It opens this page, you know it already from the installer, and you can just pick additional projects. Let's say these, and maybe eGit. Doesn't sound so exciting, but if you imagine that the Eclipse workspace, I mean, these are all plug-in projects, yeah? And they share a single target platform, and normally it's not possible to automatically combine different target files into one target platform. But with Oomph that is possible. We have modular target platform tasks, so all these projects contribute their requirements into a single target platform. You just don't have to care. It uses the same shared bundle pool, so it's also very quick, very reliable. You will never have the situation again that a P2 repository is down, and just because you opened the .target editor, your workspace doesn't compile anymore. Yeah? We carefully designed our target platform tooling such that it's fast, reliable, and convenient. Okay, I think we have a few more minutes for questions. Please.
Do you have any experience with proxy servers?
Yes, unfortunately. Yes.
How does it work there?
Yes, it does work. So we have a layer on top of P2 that does many things like caching. You can even do installations without internet. Unfortunately, that didn't work this morning. I don't know why. I will have to look at it after the conference. But that could be interesting if you're on travel and need to install something. Of course, the things you want to install must be in the bundle pool already. But the metadata is taken from the local cache then, and proxies should work. I have customers that use that, of course, in companies. Yeah. Another question?
What is a typical scenario when you use this platform setup task? Why would you need that? Because it's done when you actually install the new platform.
For example, if you have recorded new preferences in another workspace, in another IDE, and want to quickly apply them to this workspace, you use it a lot when you create your own project setup files. Then you use it to test them, for example. But you don't need to care all the time. Please?
Is there a way that I, as a programmer with plugin, can tell Oomph not to save the settings?
Not to save what?
The settings?
Yes, there's a list. There's an extension point, for example, where you can contribute preferences that should be ignored by the recorder.
Yeah.
Was that the question?
Yeah, that's the
Mhm.
question. Can I get some details? Because I already had problems with the recorder because people had said something and then it was propagated and things didn't work the way they
Yeah.
And there are some things I actually say Oomph should ignore these.
Yeah, that is possible. On the other hand, I must say, it's for me hard to demo because in the 2 years I use it, I recorded almost every preference that exists in Eclipse. So it's hard for me to find one that I have never used. But if you do that the first time, Oomph will ask you, should I record it? And should I always record later changes? So you can say no there, that is the easiest.
So what I actually want to do when I create, if I'm writing an Eclipse plugin, and I would like to have in my code say this should not be recorded by Oomph.
Yeah.
Because, for instance, if I flag something I did that, I don't want Oomph to record that he did it because it's just a flag that I did something.
Yeah, we have this extension point where you can say what and what not to record. Mhm. One last question, if you want. Please.
Can I use project sets?
Yes, we have a task for importing Eclipse team project sets. So here you see the list of tasks that we provide. Can configure API baselines, also modular, that is new. Git clones, of course, key bindings. You can configure the JREs for the Java compiler. You can configure mylin queries. You see here, this has all automatically been installed or set up by Oomph. These here are not open source, but there's a lot of stuff available. Here you see the project set import. These tasks, of course, in many cases require to install the plugins that have these tasks. But Oomph supports automatic discovery of these plugins. If they are not yet installed, you'll find them in this submenu. And once you choose such a task, it will download and install the plugins, and then you can use the tasks. Of course, you can also create your own task implementations. We have a wizard for that that creates a few stub projects, and you only have to implement 2 methods in a Java class to hook your own class task implementations into the setup engine. Okay, if you have more questions, feel free to approach me outside. I'll be here the whole day, and I hope you enjoy Oomph and less installation. Thank you.